Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is the fifth episode in the member Q&A series. If you aren't familiar with the series, I take a look at questions submitted by channel members that generally revolve around craft fairs, and I try to answer them in a way that not only helps the channel member, but broadly enough where anybody interested in craft fairs can hopefully benefit from them too. So let's take a look to see what questions we have this month. Okay, so the first couple of questions are submitted from Shayna, and I'm going to read through all of them all together and kind of answer them all together because they definitely have something to do with one another. So let's go through it. She says, I recently applied to a well-known juried craft show, and after sending several emails inquiring about my application status and receiving very little communication back, I sent one more email asking if it was possible to be placed on their wait list and was told that if a spot opened and I'd be a good fit, that they would be in touch. Okay, so that's the first part. Second part is she says, I would love to vend at this event, but I'm wondering, is there a polite way to stay on their radar for consideration or just to let it go and keep moving forward? And then finally, she closes with, additionally, is it beneficial to make product for an event I may not even participate in, or direct that time and energy into enhancing other areas of my craft? Okay, so you can kind of see how these questions flow into one another. So let's kind of just start at the top here and address this first segment. So I'm going to be kind of frank with you and let you know that, in my opinion, I think there's a couple of red flags here with the organizer. If it's a juried craft fair, a lot of times what they'll do is the organizers will have some sort of a window to determine like who's going to be in the event, and they're going to have some sort of like registration period that opens and closes. So that the reason why is that you don't want to leave the vendors hanging. Okay, you don't want to leave vendors calendars kind of just open-ended where it's like, well, maybe you'll be part of it, maybe you won't. To me, that's what a good organizer does. Again, I think there's a couple of red flags here with how they're handling this, where it's so open-ended and you're just not getting anything concrete back, let alone any communication back at times. Okay, so that's kind of like your first red flag is, you're just not hearing back sometimes. And then also they're leaving you very, very open-ended where it's like, maybe if we like you, we'll put you on the wait list. I'm not really a fan of that. I don't really like that. So to me, that would rub me the wrong way as a vendor. And to be fair, like in your area, I don't know if you have a lot of options to go to for organizers, or maybe you're kind of in an area where there's just not a lot of craft fair organizers. But to me, this would really rub me the wrong way. So that's kind of like the first peel back of the onion that we're going to do on this. The next thing I want to talk about is your middle segment here, where you're even starting to kind of question, like, is there a polite way to stay on their radar, or should you let it go and keep moving forward? I would try to move forward. This, even though it might be like a premier event, and it kind of sounds like that just based on like your desire to get into this event. So that part, yes, that part is a shame, but just personally, I would rather deal with organizers who communicate well and I know what to expect. And when I write a date down in my event calendar, like I can count on it, I want to be able to count on people. And predictability in the craft fair industry, I think, is good. You want to know information ahead of time so that you can game plan around it. Vendors, this isn't going to be your only event, so you're trying to not only plan for this particular event, but you're also trying to plan for things around it as well. So that's kind of what I am referring to when I talk about predictability and communication and actions and things like that. So that's kind of what I want to touch on in that second segment. Now, finally, with your like final portion of the question, you say, again, is it beneficial to make product for an event I may not participate in, or direct that time and energy into enhancing other areas of my craft. So I was actually talking to my wife a little bit about this, and we were discussing this particular portion of the question, and we both found it to be not strange, but I think you might put yourself in a tricky situation if you start designing items with a specific craft fair in mind. Okay, so I would try to just keep your crafts kind of like transferable to any show, and there's going to be like certain shows that maybe attract like a certain demographic a little bit more than others. Like, let's say, for example, you participate in like a women's expo. Okay, so obviously that demographic is going to be a little bit different as opposed to just a general craft fair where you might have like more of a balance between, male and female audience or whatever, you know what I mean? So you'll have those ebbs and flows, but to design something for a specific craft fair in mind, that gets a little bit turns into kind of like a slippery slope because you're really dedicating a lot of resources. And I'm talking about many resources like your time, your energy, your money, just your general inventory into, one specific basket, kind of putting the eggs in one basket, right? Whereas if you just kind of create in a broad sense that can be applied to any show, then, you don't really have to worry about stresses like this where, you have an organizer who's kind of flaky on the communication. And now all of a sudden you have a lot more stress put on yourself because maybe you have this particular inventory that's dedicated to this one show and it's not going to work at other shows. Okay. So that's what I would kind of suggest for this portion of the question, is to create your crafts in more of a general sense. And then that way, you're not setting yourself up to miss out on opportunities and, lost profit with inventory loss and things like that. So I hope this helped. This was a great question though, because I think a lot of vendors kind of get themselves into positions like this where they really enjoy the show, but then sometimes the organizers aren't really the best to meet, communicate with and work with and things like that. So it's kind of like, when do you cut your losses and when do you move on? And just want to say that's a great question to submit. Okay, so the next set of questions is from Eliana, and I'm going to read these back to back as well because, again, they kind of flow into one another and we can answer them together. So the first part is, this is not really directed at craft fairs in particular, but what are the pros and cons of having a physical store? And then she also asks, what can I do to go about selling through wholesale? Okay, so definitely connected to one another. And let's start with the physical store. So by saying physical store, I think you kind of mean like, brick and mortar, that type of thing, like literally having your own storefront. A lot of things to consider when doing this. There is a tremendous amount of overhead costs and things that you're going to have to consider that you just simply do not have to deal with in the realm of craft fairs. Now, guys, fair warning on this. My specialty is definitely craft fairs. Okay. So I'm going to try to help on these types of questions, but really I'm just kind of answering to the best of my ability. All right. So again, with a brick and mortar, some of the pros that we look at is full control, right? I mean, you have full control of a lot of aspects of it where, maybe you don't as a craft fair vendor, okay, where you're participating in somebody else's event. Maybe there's like certain rules that are passed down either from the event organizer or even from the facility or the township or city that you live in where, things have to be a certain way. Okay. So when you have your own storefront, your own brick and mortar, those are some things that in most cases you really don't have to deal with, other than like building codes and, safety, safety measures and things like that. Okay. Now that is part of the con of having your own brick and mortar. The expenses can be tremendous because not only do you have to pay rent for a building or some kind of a spot somewhere, right? You're also going to have, things like utility bills. You're also going to have to pay for insurance and different types of insurance too, because you're going to want to insure all the product that's in your store. But then you also need to have things like liability insurance if, somebody gets injured in your building or something like that. You'll probably have to have some sort of insurance to safeguard yourself against, theft in the event that there was theft that occurred in your building. Um, Security, so you have to factor in all the security measures that you're gonna have to not only, again, keep your inventory safe, but your shoppers safe and things like that. So when you start to really like think about all that's going to go into having your own space, it is just a staggering amount of responsibility, not just financially, but I mean, in other ways as well. Time, you're going to spend a lot more time on this than you probably would as a craft fair vendor. Okay. Because craft fair vendor, you're kind of just in and out and you don't have that like daily dedication, to a storefront. Okay. So, these are just some of the things to think about. I know this was like kind of just on the surface and a little bit generalized, but I hope this at least gives you some kind of an idea of the things that can be involved when you go down this road. Now, if you're not talking about a brick and mortar, say you're renting a space, okay? So say there's like a craft gallery. So sometimes you see these in towns where there's like kind of like a gallery and you can rent like a booth, like a basically a permanent booth. And now that's kind of touching into the wholesale portion of the question, okay? Because sometimes that's how these things work, where you can either like commission your products. So say, for example, you do a little bit of a markup on your items and you get a cut and the building gets a cut or the owner gets a cut. You can do it like that. Or if you're renting a booth, then you basically just pay the booth fee, right? Kind of like you would at a craft fair, but of course it's going to be substantially more. And you work it out that way. So when it comes to straight up wholesale, I want to just maybe kind of get some clarification on this. So I'm going to speak a little bit about it, but maybe drop a comment below and kind of tell me your thoughts on how this answer went and things like that, if it helped you or not. But wholesale to me is basically if you were to manufacture quite a bit of product and then sell it to some sort of storefront or shop owner or things like that. And then, you got that money for selling wholesale to them, like as a batch, and then they're free to mark it up however they choose to. At that point, it's kind of like off your hands and that's their product now. This, again, very, very much outside of my area of expertise, but I don't know. I don't really know too much about it. I don't know if there's a lot of risk that goes into producing that much product at one time up front. That to me, if I was creating a whole bunch of inventory like that, that part would make me a little bit nervous. What I would say is that if you choose to go down this road, have everything mapped out ahead of time in advance. Okay. So obviously some sort of like purchase agreement or contract where all the specifics are laid out ahead of time before you create this batch. Because if you go ahead and you make a whole ton of stock that's dedicated for this wholesale event and it falls through, well then now what? Are you going to be able to turn that around at craft fairs, or have you put yourself into a huge financial hole? So just again, consider these things and really weigh it all out and see if it's a good fit for you. But I know that you're a great craft fair vendor. I've seen your booth progress like over the last year or so, and it's been great. So at any rate, keep us updated. I know that you're really active in the comments section, so let us know what you do. Let us know what path you go down and how it goes. Okay, and finally, we're going to be looking at a booth. Okay, so this is basically a potential booth that could happen. This question is being sent in from Danielle, and she says she'd like to know what types of booth area setups are acceptable for indoor vendor events. I'm looking at having my husband build me something, possibly collapsible, like the picture, to use instead of a folding table. And then she goes on to say, I think this option could give me the opportunity to better market what I'm selling, as well as having more space to sell items. I could have 2 2-foot wide shelving units and 1 4-foot table turned lengthwise to put in the middle. So here's a picture of it. It's very, very attractive, okay, on first glance, very, very nice looking. But some of the concerns that I'll bring up are, is this going to be okay with every event organizer? Okay, so this pretty much goes back to the very beginning of your question when you want to know what type of booth area setups are acceptable for indoor vendors. Now, this is going to vary from organizer to organizer and show to show, and even sometimes, again, based on the facility or the township, sometimes there's limitations and like certain guidelines and parameters that are in place for the vendors. Okay, so again, that could even fall into something such as like building and safety codes. Okay, so that part of this is going to be very difficult to predict. Okay, so if you're already working with some organizers, like say, for example, if you're participating in some annual events that, you kind of sign up for year after year, I would run it past them. I think this would be a really good idea to run past a couple of organizers that you already work with and say, hey, what do you think about this? Would this be cool at a show? And do you see any issues with it? And lay it out with them. That's probably going to be your best bet, because you're going to get the feedback based off of the people controlling the shows that you're participating in. Okay, so that's definitely something that I would do. As far as the logistics and like feasibility of all this, it seems like it's possible. Okay, I mean, just physically possible, especially if this can be made in a way where it's at least somewhat collapsible. That's going to be great for transport. Obviously, you want it to be made in a really, really sturdy, like rugged manner, because collapsible items, they're going to wear down quickly. I mean, just with, the folding and the unfolding, that's a lot of stress on, the hardware and all that stuff that these things are made out of. So just take all that into consideration. Don't just think about like the setup, think about the transport and just like the natural wear and tear and how beaten up these things are going to get. And then, think about, okay, is this going to be like good long term, or is it just going to last like one season and stuff like that. So a lot going into this. Again, I want to just mention that it is a very, very attractive design. Again, I show my wife this and we both thought it looked like a storefront. It just looked like kind of like a pop-up shop that really came to life. And it is something that for sure would stand out compared to a lot of booths, no doubt about it. So take all that into consideration, contact some event organizers, see what they say, talk to your husband about, just like the stress of, folding and unfolding and collapsing and transporting, all that stuff. And, how you guys could design it where it would stand the test of time, where it would actually be worth it financially to go through with building this, so that you can enjoy it for years to come. So those are all the questions I have for this episode. I hope I answered them to a decent ability. Some of the stuff in this particular episode was like a little bit on the fringe of what I'm, familiar with and all that. But again, just throwing some ideas out there, just, some things to at least consider. Okay. So I like to kind of do that. And I hope it doesn't come across as negative, just kind of shooting things down, but it's more so just like, trying to think of all the what ifs, all the what ifs that come with these ideas, because a lot of times they're good ideas, but you just want to make sure that you have all those cracks filled in, so that you can execute them to the best of your ability. So thank you for tuning in to the 5th episode of the Member Q&A video series. This is a once a month video series where questions are submitted by channel members. To become a channel member, check out the join button below the video and you can learn about the different perks and levels and tiers and things like that that come with a channel membership. It's kind of like a super subscription. If you enjoyed the video and got value out of it, please consider liking, subscribing, and dropping a comment so that you can join the conversation. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.